Good afternoon, and thank you for joining today's webinar from Spec Innovations, Improve Product Design with High Quality Requirements. My name is Elizabeth Steiner, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. Let's go over some quick housekeeping before we get started. During the presentation, feel free to send us questions using the panel on the right, and we will get them answered in the question and answer part of the webinar. The webinar is being recorded, and we will make it available to you after the live presentation, so be sure to keep an eye out for it in your inbox. Now, I would like to introduce you to our presenter, Dr. Steve Dam. He'll be discussing with you his tips and tricks on writing high-quality requirements. Dr. Dam is the president and founder of Spec Innovations, as well as one of our DODAF training instructors. He has been involved with research, experiments, operations analysis, software development, systems engineering, and training for more than 40 years. Dr. Dam participated in the development of C4ISR Architecture Framework and DoD Architecture Framework. He has also received an Expert Systems Engineering Professional Certification from NCOSE. He currently is applying systems engineering techniques to various DoD, DOE, and commercial projects. And now I'll hand over the controls to Dr. Dam, and we will get started.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So many of you have had to develop requirements for projects, and it's quite a challenge. And so I've been doing it for over 30 years, so I'm going to give you some ideas and thoughts that we've had about how better to do it. So one of the first things I think most of you know is you've got to know your stakeholders. You got to understand what they understand. Create that common knowledge between each other. And of course, you have to make sure the whole team's on the same page, that you're all working together for the same objectives and goals, and you understand what those are well. You also want to make sure that each group understands the priorities. What priorities? So oftentimes we'll create a stakeholder matrix and do that analysis is one of the very first things you do as part of your, if you do it in a diagramming form, it's a context diagram. So that's a great way to do that. One of the keys is, though, you need some kind of collaborative software that helps you do this, because today we're all working in different places, sometimes in different countries, let alone different time zones, and having something that allows you to work together and interact is critical. You also want to understand what's needed versus what's wanted and try to make those distinctions. You know, you have goals and objectives. You know, you can always have what's your threshold and working to that. And so as you're looking at requirements, so differentiating them, but understand that the customer really wants what the customer wants. And so ultimately you're trying to satisfy the customer, and you want to help them understand that and what the difference is. And here's what you say you want, but here's what you absolutely need. And so we'll make sure those come together in a logical way. The key is, will the system work without a particular requirement? You know, that's how you differentiate between the two. Of course, you know, you want to list what's actually needed, not just possible solutions. So keeping that focus keeps it down, keeps it within cost. And that's a key driver for any customers. They want to make sure that what you're going to do makes sense, it can be done quickly, and it can be done cost effectively. One of the ways it helps that, and one of the tools that I've used historically is a ConOps. Concept operations is one of the most valuable artifacts you can develop. You want to be able to make sure the stakeholders understand it and collaborate. It's a great document that helps people understand what those things are. You can use scenario analysis and functional analysis to help derive what those needs are, and they can see that more effectively. And that's a great way for people to get the vision of where it can go and needs to go. So that ConOps can help you write those quality requirements you're looking for by helping you find all the assumptions that are underlying the requirements. And that's an important factor too, documenting those assumptions as you go along. Of course, it would help if you have to have the what-if scenarios and make sure you can do the testing and formulating the needs into requirements. And so you want to have an ability to link all that information together in one place. And that's difficult. Again, a lot of the requirements tools, or most people use a spreadsheet. They use Excel, and they'll try to capture information that way. But it's very hard to see the scenarios and see how they work. Do they work or don't work? So be specific. Don't leave room for assumptions. Make sure that the words such as minimize, maximize, and or etc. These things you want to try to avoid because they have so many meanings, and etc. can mean anything to anybody. So you want to be specific enough that it's clear what you're trying to get across. Watch those ands and ors. Those are two different requirements, perhaps. So again, you got to be careful about that. That whole thing about mins and maxes. Again, you need it more quantitative. You've got to try to limit it to a specific value so it can be then tested. Because otherwise, where do you test to? So you can't verify the requirement was met. And so, of course, that doesn't often happen till the end, but if you don't know that going in, people are going to have totally different expectations as to what's a realistic number and what isn't. Again, same thing with quick. I love that word. It's like, oh, what does that mean? Define quick. I mean, quick, if you're in a warfighting situation, is milliseconds sometimes. In communications, it could be microseconds. So again, these are things that you're just in a different regime of worrying about time and making sure that's clear to everybody. So giving the actual numbers is extremely helpful and helps validate what the correct results you're looking for are. But at the same time, you've got to be careful not to over-specify. That's always a big problem. People drive too deep and too low and force things to happen that end up costing lots of money. And so that trade-off, it's really an optimization between the cost, schedule, and performance. Those are the things you're looking to optimize, even in the requirements phase. So you're trying to understand what those are and be just the right level specific. It's sort of the Goldilocks approach. Hopefully everybody can hear me. It looks like we may be having a little bit of audio difficulties. So if you're having trouble, well, let us know. Okay, so again, be careful to review your requirements for baselining. Baselines use your setup so that they don't change, and so you want to make sure you have the right set of things you're looking for. And also, again, try to delete those unnecessary specifics. One of the things we look for is somebody specifying a piece of software or a piece of hardware that has to be done, or a person. That happens all the time, we see too, and things. So again, functional requirements, performance requirements are all good, but be careful about that. Again, the numbers are critical with that, and it's always good to have that uncertainty, that understanding of what are you looking for. If you really want something to be 3 times as good, well, what's your error margin there? What are you looking for? What's your threshold and what's your real objective? And why? Do you have which? Another thing is make sure the requirements are not instructions. So again, this is a part of that being this over-specific. You need to understand what's needed and create the requirements from the needs. Again, not necessarily the wants. Watch the wants, track those, but make sure the needs are being really satisfied. And of course, that's knowing the stakeholder. That's why knowing the stakeholder is so critical. Is you really are trying to understand what those requirements are and the real needs are. Of course, the requirements have to provide enough information to allow somebody to build something that's a cost-effective solution. And so again, that's that optimization. I'm looking for just enough information so that the developers can do their job and the stakeholders know what they're going to get and everybody's happy. That's always the difficulty. I see somebody is having some problems with audio, so we'll. Okay, so it's good. Okay, so somebody is getting good audio. Okay, thank you. Okay. So one of the things that happens is people will sometimes, just write a requirement, not give it a number or a unique name to help with maybe a short name to help see it visually. And all 3 of those things are attributes of a requirement that are actually pretty important to have. One of the things particularly we see in when people go into the modeling side of things is they don't write descriptions. in requirements, it's just the opposite. They'll write descriptions, but they won't give it a unique number. They won't give it a unique name to help track it and work with it more directly. So that's something that you want to consider as you're working through it and making sure you have the things. The other is often there's a rationale field that's missing too. So other data that you need to make sure that you want to have consistency and also track, how good a requirement is it. So that's one of the keys about quality requirements is that you need to be able to have enough information you can look at, understand, and say, is this really good? Is this really meeting all the criteria I have for a good requirement? Of course, you need traceability. I mean, having a requirement by itself isn't very, very useful. You have to say, well, what are you going to do with that requirement? How is it going to be satisfied? How is it going to be verified? These are relationships that you need to establish and have. And again, that's the difficulty of doing this in a database kind of, in a spreadsheet kind of approach. That tends to be fairly linear, whereas this is a very nonlinear kind of thing. You're linking many things together, and it gets confusing if you try to do that on a spreadsheet. Using the words of shall, should, and will. Some people will argue that shall is the only legal defined requirement, but many people will do the shoulds and wills and are required. We ran into that one recently. So understand that the industry standard and everybody's standard is shall, but as you're doing work, particularly if you're analyzing a requirements deck, you'll see these other things. And of course, those are not ideal, but that's what we see. So try to use the standard words as much as possible.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make sure if everyone can hear us, can you please let us know? We're having some audio issues.
Yeah, I just saw that. Somebody's having audio. Okay, we'll keep trying. If I need to repeat stuff, again, when we hit Q&A, I'll be glad to repeat anything that was missed. Again, make sure you include the rationale. I said that just a minute ago. Foot stopping it here, making sure we do that is very important. It's a justification for the requirement that helps people understand it more. Again, a requirement should be short, a single sentence, making it very clear what you mean. But even then, you often have to give it some background and other information. So a rationale field helps to avoid that confusion down the line, is what the intent of the requirement was. Again, use proper grammar. Hey, we all got into engineering because we didn't want to have to do English, but guess what? If you're doing requirements, you're writing in English or whatever language you're working in wherever you are. So again, using that proper grammar helps reduce confusion, particularly the run-on sentences. We see often have 2 or 3 or 4 requirements in them, let alone one. The one that you should have at a time. Each one should be unique, so you can easily be traceable specifically. Anyway, so also some grammar mistakes, using there, and there, those are things. Principle and principle will get you, right? There's lots of those kinds of things that we have, particularly in English. There's a lot of overlap in terms of how you use words, and be careful with that. By the way, adjectives sometimes actually make it worse, not better, so be careful of that too. Misspellings, of course, things like that will get you. So one of the nice things is that most of the time there's grammar and spelling checkers built into a lot of the tools these days. So that does help us a lot. I know that's improved my writing significantly over the years. So one of the things you can do to improve the grammar is use bullet points first and then construct sentences out of them. A lot of us are used to doing that. We're used to doing a slide and we do the bullets. And then from that you can derive a sentence and make it more complete. And feel free to use someone who is an expert in English. It's kind of funny because a lot of times I see people want an engineer to do the requirements. Well, I don't know if I don't want to have someone who speaks better English do requirements first, talking to the engineer. that's another way to do it, and it actually can be faster, better, and cheaper. Using standards is also very helpful. They're there to help us ensure consistency. There's all kinds of standards out there. There's still MIL standards, IEEE, ISO have standards. A lot of places have these standards that are available. One of the problems I've run into, though, is that you have to pay for some of these standards, like IEEE. They're not free. So you've got to go there and buy the standard and buy the information and make sure that you apply it. So that some of these things can be a cost you have to include in your actual estimates of what you're going to do on a job. Again, make sure that you use the right one for your industry. So again, there are many other standards groups outside these ones. So try to see if you can identify the right ones for what you need. Okay, so let's talk about tools to help you write high quality requirements. One of the things is InnoSlate was designed to do this. It was designed to quality check your requirements for you. There's actually a natural language processing algorithm that goes through and reads the description field for the requirement and has you understand it. This saves tremendous amount of time and energy in trying to make sure you have good quality requirements. It also helps you increase that accuracy of what you're looking for and gets you developing complete requirements. And as you start using it, like the grammar checkers and things like that, it'll help you write a better requirement over time. Some of the ones we have that we've built into the tool are these here. There's only a couple we can't automatically check. I think it's correct. And let's see, what's the one with legal in it? Yeah, oh, that's correct. And then there's another one that we don't check. Feasible. There we go. So those are the two we can't automatically check because, as you can see, those would be very difficult to do from the information that's available within a single requirement. You'd have to actually look at everything at once. So again, this is an aid to the analyst. It's not to replace the analyst, please. But as you walk through these, you can see this is a pretty good set. If you say, well, gee, I don't really care about all these, you can go into the schema editor and you can hide the ones you don't want to see, and they won't be then rolled up into the quality score we create from that information. Or if you want to add one and you can add it to the quality score, you could add one. So again, whatever your desire is, go for it. Make sure you have the things you need and you tailor this to your needs specifically. Also, we have another analytical tool, again using natural language processing technology, which goes through and looks across the entire model. So all the different elements and attributes of the tool are captured and looked at for these various heuristics that were provided by this. I want to thank the Stevens Institute of Technology for doing that work and Naval Postgraduate School, who provided that information to us. And so we use those heuristics to go through and work with that. It really helps you check and make sure you have higher quality across your entire model, not just the requirements. But there is a specific additional section on requirements in this intelligence view. You can go through and customize those, by the way, as well. Again, you can hide things you're not interested in or you won't give warnings on, things like that. So again, a lot of these are all very tailorable things for you. Here's an example of that where you can go in and check. As the pull-down menu gives you the three options of ignore, error, or warning, and that lets you determine how important the requirement, this heuristic is. And again, you can read in plain English what each one of them does and why they're important. Okay, so let's jump into the actual tool demo so you can see something real. It's always fun to do slides, but only for so long. So here's InnoSlate, and this is our requirements view. I have a particular one. This is the mission needs, goals, and objectives statement. It was derived from a book, the Applied Space Systems Engineering book. many of you are probably familiar with it. So what you see here is the individual requirement, and you click on it and see it's a requirement. We actually distinguish between requirements and statements. Statements are providing contextual information for the requirements. So you can separate them out. If you say that's really not a requirement, that's just a statement, you can eliminate that by just going up here to more and transform the statement, and that'll turn it into a statement for you. Here's the fields. Again, you just click in to edit. So here's the number field, your name field, and your description field. In the description field, you can put more than just a set of words. Again, for requirements, you usually try to keep this simple, but sometimes you want to include a picture or some other thing. So hyperlink is available. You can add a picture. You can add a diagram from the tool. So if some other place you want to have set, we've generated maybe a process flow or something like that you want to make into a requirement, you can do that here as well. You can embed tables and a horizontal rule even. So again, you can make this fairly complex. And it has all these other kinds of word processing kind of tools and techniques that you need to make it look specific for what you're trying to do. So you can make a pretty good picture out of it. And notice the quality scores over here. So I can go see what those attributes were on the sidebar here. So by clicking more attributes, and then it shows me where it had a problem. It said it wasn't complete because there's not a period. Okay, so it's not a full sentence that way usually, and then it does not seem to specify anything, so no verb phrase. So again, it's not really a full requirement, right? The way this is written. So we'd want to go through and clean that up and make that better. Here's an example, by the way, of adding other attributes that are out. These are, I believe, outside the quality score itself. So again, you can add your own attributes as you want to. Also notice here the comments tab. So this is a place where you could add a comment about it. And so this is a way you can do reviews, internal reviews, or external reviews with people. So you can have the read-only users can actually not change what's here, but they can add comments and post the comments and work with that. When I skipped over this tab with the metadata, so for every one of them, there's a unique identifier we provide, the class, the modified and created bys, okay, so that information, and then labels. Labels are used to sort and determine different things you're looking for. So for example here, this is a functional requirement, and if I came over here into this view, this part of it, clicking off let me go back and do that again. So I just clicked the cancel button rather than the save button, so I didn't save it again. So cancel button, and then come do that, and then say I have 6 functional requirements. Let's just sort on those. So there's my functional requirements set. I have 7 performance requirements. I can go find those. And notice you can have something be more than one type. Okay, so it's okay if that's what you've set up, and that's the way you want to work things. Verification requirements. See there are a few there. So again, if you want to get them all back, just click off the X there, and it brings everything back. Again, a lot of information, particularly to absorb very quickly. More information here. So there's a satisfied by relationship here. This one has both a satisfied by and a trace to relationship. You see those, your quality score. Here's your rationale field. Again, you click in here and just add the rationale. I'm showing labels. This is totally configurable, by the way. You go to settings and add something else. So let's say I'm worried about clarity, and I want to make sure I have all the clear attributes seen too directly. And so now you see that information show up here, and now I can see that same thing that was on the sidebar in this view. So again, you can do that with any of the attributes. This is completely tailorable. Also, when you run reports, the reports will work off of that information that's showing. So your basic document output will include all these columns of information. Notice also you have other views of information as well, including all the traceability matrices and things like that. Those tie together with other elements in our database, by the way. So some of those particularly you want to use the relationships. Again, there's a lot more to this tool than just requirements. Again, we like hierarchies, so we deal with things hierarchically, as you can see, so we can kind of collapse it. Or you come over here to the navigator and go to the specific thing you want to see. So again, that's another way you can work with this. Also notice you can have multiple requirements documents. You have as many as you want, as many as you need. Let's go over the verification requirements for a second. And in here, I've got the verified by relationship showing up very explicitly, because these are the verification requirements, which were derived from and traced from, in fact, those are other requirements. I can see that, and I'll show you that in a minute, but let me go on a little bit more with this. So here's the baselining capability. So all you do to baseline is come in and tie in a baseline number, name number, whatever you want to do it. That will freeze the document. And so let's see an example of it. This is the previous version of the same set of requirements. And see, it's all has blue bars now, and all the editing features are gone, right? So that's the whole idea. So now this is frozen in time. And so if I want to actually make any changes to it, I have to come up and use the current version. So it's a forcing function to do that. Now there are reports that allow you to look at the change between things. So again, post baseline change report does that. So you can see what the differences are between the different documents. Again, you can see a lot of features here for doing really high quality requirements development and analysis. And I think that's the key, is it's not just requirements management. People focus on the word management, and that's important, but so is analysis. And that's a lot of times our jobs as engineers. We're analyzing the requirements to make sure they make sense and they're better requirements. That's where the quality factor comes into play. Notice these are actually, in many ways, higher quality requirements. They have a shall statement, they're written much better and much stronger verbiage. So one of the things also you may want to be able to do is visualize these in other ways. So you can go to open and look at a document tree. And what we mean by document tree may not be what you classically think of as a document tree, by the way. So this is taking the artifact, which is the top level document that we're working from, and then breaking it down into the individual requirements or statements and requirements. And so notice, by the way, when I click on these, that same information we were seeing in the other view is here. Okay, if I make a change here, it will make a change everywhere else. So that's the important thing about what we call view generation, is it allows you to see what the information is and in any different form or format. Go back to requirements view. So lots of other things here. So one of the things we haven't done is actually show you another view of the same object. So here is it in requirements view, but we also have another view called entity view. Now, entity view has all that information about the entity, but it's laid out in a different way. You can also now see the relationships in more detail. So now I have a better way to look at that information about it. In the ontology we use, we have lots of relationships. If you go to the All tab, it's almost overwhelming how many. So that's why we have a tailorable, popular tab, so you can actually change these tabs and adjust it to what you're looking for. Make sure you have the things up there that you're interested in, making sure working with it. So again, that's something, if you have questions about how to do that, we're happy to help you with that. Another thing to do with this is, notice there's a button called History showed up. History shows the history of that object, that requirement, all the way through, all the changes that have been made through its whole lifetime. Who made them, when they made them. Okay, so you can see all that. If you need to, you can revert back to a previous version. You can go backwards with it that way. And that's a good way to making sure you didn't make a mistake or an error, and you can always undo the errors by coming back into history and doing that. Another thing, again, we have auto numbering capabilities, duplication, follow and unfollow. By the way, follow is something that is part of notifications. So you have the ability to be notified when changes are made. So this is another part of that. The requirements management feature is that if you're the manager, you can then subscribe to seeing the changes in the requirements as they go on, and you can then help approve them and make sure they make sense. A couple other things to show you with this view. Again, you see the labels, you can adjust the labels, you can add new labels here too if you need to as you're going through it. By the way, you can upload a picture to anything, so you can add a picture to anything this way as well. So any object can have a picture associated with it. Let's take another look at another option diagrammatically that's very interesting and useful is the spider diagram. So the spider diagram, I'm sorry, I have clicked on the single object. So this particular one doesn't have a lot. Let's see, is that right? No, I'm sorry. Okay, let me try it again. I did something wrong. Okay, because I have presets already set. I was doing something else this morning with it. Just so you know, we use this tool ourselves every day. So it's one of those things we find is very important. So here's, let's a little better. So the legend is movable, by the way, and you can adjust and move and see where things are. This is pretty big. See, that got to be very big. So you have a lot of ways to navigate that. There's a navigation capability here. So I can go to the center of it that way. So again, this was what I started with, was this entity. Again, notice all that information about it's right here on the sidebar. So I can see that and work with that. What's kind of neat about this view is I can bring in new requirements. I can take existing requirements or other things and bring them in here, link them together. So if I wanted to bring in this cost element, and I could tie that together with this, and the relationship would be probably incurred by. Again, it helps you do a lot of this kind of analysis and work as you go through it. Again, you can also scale it. You can adjust the levels. Maybe I just want to see 2 levels. Again, these are things you can do to make it easier to work with, easier to understand. You can even also come over here, and as you saw earlier, I can go through and look at the different presets and change relationships that I'm looking at and work with it. So again, it's another way to tailor it to what you need. So anyways, hopefully that helps. I'll make sure I didn't accidentally do something with that. Okay, good. I think we've got through the basic sets of requirements information. So why don't we finish up, Lizzie, and we can go ahead and get questions. We have plenty of time for questions.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Dam. Before we go to our question and answer session, let's just quickly recap what we've talked about. So when you're writing requirements documents, it's important that we keep these 12 tips in mind. Know your stakeholders, understand what is really needed, remember the CONOPS, be specific, don't be too specific, give requirements, not instructions, include a number, name, and description, must have traceability, use the words shall, should, and will, include a rationale, use proper grammar, and use a standard. I think that sums up everything. So now let's get started with our question and answer session. We've already received a few questions. If you haven't had a chance, please send your questions to this panel on the right. Feel free to ask as many questions as you have. Dr. Dan will answer as many questions as he can before our time is up. All right, well, our first question was from a little way back. Are ConOps the same thing as use cases?
Yes, you can use that same use case is kind of a specific methodology people talk about. I use this term scenario. So it's a part of the ConOps is scenarios. And so that's usually where we put those. Usually there's a section in them for that. In fact, let me just show you in our InnoSlate, we actually have a ConOps document. And in this particular template, we're using the operational scenarios are in section 5. We do have other options for other ones. So if you wanted to create another one, just come over here, create new, and I could use the DAU template, so Defense Acquisition University. So one of the things we really like about this is you can create all your documentation in the tool as well. So if you notice in here, as I scroll down, I'll find the operational scenarios are here in section 4 of this particular one. So we provide you templates from a whole variety of different sources, NASA, DoD, CDC seems to have a lot of good ones out there. So we've actually used a number of those kinds of templates available. And of course, you can use your own template, create your own template and work with it as well. That answer the question?
I think so. Our next question is, can you expand upon the use value of the Trace2 versus satisfied by and verified by?
Sure. So I use all three and for different things. Let me go back to requirements view and show you that. So we use Trace2 to help trace it to another maybe lower level requirement would be a way to use that, or to something else, to a physical object. Maybe I'm going to say I have a requirement for painting it gray. All the equipment has to be painted gray, so I might want to allocate that to the equipment that I'm doing, at least the external boxes for the equipment I'm building. And so I would make sure I had that. So we call those assets. So you can capture them that way in part of your physical model. Or maybe it's a functional requirement that as you're doing and you're trying to develop the functional analysis and doing those scenarios we were just talking about, which are part of functional analysis, you would end up creating and tying the requirement to that action. And again, use an action entity for that purpose. So again, different purposes for different things. Satisfied by is another one that can be used in many different ways. So again, depends what you're trying to do. Let's just take a look at what the ones we use for that particular object as an example. So I don't have them all up in popular, so let's go over to the All tab and see the satisfied by was a overall test. So I had that. It wasn't the verification of that specific element, but it's satisfied when I complete that test. So again, I'm using them in different ways, but you get to define that it's not predefined by us. And again, if you also want to create other requirements, you can do that. We will recommend using ours as much as you can because we already have reports designed for it and to work with them effectively. So I think you'll find that if you work within the system we have, you'll have better results.
Our next question is, do I automatically get a history of each object even if I don't use the baseline facility?
Oh, yes. Yes. History is automatic for every object at every point in time. Baselining is really only to freeze a document so that it itself can't be changed, that you create a new version that's being changed. And so the purpose of that is particularly if I'm going to do like milestone reviews and things like that, I have to freeze the document that's being reviewed. And so that's the primary purpose for that.
Does Innosight have any facilities for executing tests, such as software test framework?
So we don't actually execute the tests, but we do have a test center. So there is an actual place where you can capture your tests. First of all, you can create a test plan. We also have a test center. And what's kind of neat about the test center is, again, you can capture the status and roll them up and work with those kinds of things. These are a special case of the action. So you can also create from it an action diagram, which means that's your process. So now you can actually define your process and model your process, and then use all the features we have for that, which allow you to do a cost and schedule analysis of your tests, so you can find out how long your tests are going to take, that kind of thing.
Our next question is there a way to use existing documents to extract requirements into Innosight?
Oh, yes. So we have a parser. We call it the import analyzer, and you can bring them in as a Word document, but the Word document is where they're actually using the style headings for the headings 1, 2, 3, because we're looking for that information to determine the hierarchy of the requirements. So that's a key one we use. We also have, you can bring it in with a CSV, and we have a special one for doors, for all you doors users. And then oftentimes you find yourself just working with plain text, and a PDF can be copied and pasted into this and used that way. In that situation, you need to select what kind of structure it is to help us. Because what happens is with word processing, people are not consistent. And so for a machine to try to understand what's being done, can be very confusing. By the way, if you don't see a list you like, there's a custom formatting option that allows you to customize it. So you just click the button I just did here. You notice it added another tab up here for customize. And so it'll walk you through doing that.
Our next question is, during the presentation, you showed Intelligence View. Is that something that you can show us live?
Sure. So Intelligence View is here. Again, it's off the menu bar over to Tools. And here's it is. This is a global one where it said ND names and descriptions that do not contain ambiguous words. So again, you're looking for quality. Everything in what you're doing in your database is actually part of some level of requirements, either the higher level requirements or a lower level specification. So you want to make sure you reduce the ambiguity wherever you can. Another example here is they don't begin with a capital letter. That may be important to you, that may not be. You could decide that's not important and just ignore it. Again, some NDs are not related to any other entity. That's orphans. I have things that are just there and may or may not be important. This particular one is, because it was actually part of our identification of an architecture study that needed to be done. Entities with similar names. There's another one looking for duplicates. It helps you find that kind of information. So it goes on and on. Let me scroll down. And it'll be a while to get to requirements. But there's a specific section on requirements itself. So here's some on the requirements. So the following entities are mentioned in a requirements description but not been related to that requirement. This says I've got potential duplication even in my requirements decks, or I have a higher level requirement that hasn't been allocated where it should be to something else. There is a fix button over here to tell you where to make those connections or how to fix the problem, help you try to add that problem fix to the problem. So you can add trace to relationships, for example, here. Things like that. So this is something very valuable in helping understand and working the model. Requirements of more than one parent. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. You got to decide if it is or isn't. Requirements with no name, and that's often, again, just bad practice. And it's one of the things that goes on when you're trying to visualize them in the visualization tools, makes that a little harder. Here's a leaf level requirement not satisfied by any action, asset, input, output, or conduit. So it's never been allocated correctly to what's performing it. So that's an important traceability thing. So again, you can see these are very useful items to work with. You're missing the shall, and also requires no description. So again, lots of things to help you do a better analysis and create a higher quality requirement. All this is configurable. I mentioned earlier. Go back to the top here. There's a settings button for that. This is where you get to that panel to be able to change it, error, or ignore it all, whatever you like to do.
Our next question is a follow-up question to the test center.
Okay.
If Innosight doesn't have a test execution facility, is there a mechanism to tie into a third-party test tool?
Absolutely. So we have APIs that we use ourselves, by the way. So a lot of people are a little afraid of using tools APIs, but since we use them internally, we don't deprecate them hardly ever because it messes up our own code. So they're very easy to use. They're Java APIs, and we can help you get set up to doing that. We're happy to work with you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Please go ahead.
Sorry. No. I was just saying we're very helpful people do things like that.
Our next question is it possible to generate a report for export of only entities and search results, or entities filtered by labels?
Yes, it is. So in fact, all the different views are kind of what you see is what you get. So if you filter a particular selection or piece of information and you run a report, that report would only include the items you've selected. So if you filtered it and done those things, it should be able to do that. If you have any problems with that, let us know. We're happy to help you do that. And you also may need a special report. So that's another thing we can help you do.
Our next question is, does each requirement have a unique ID?
Yes, absolutely. The unique ID identifier is right here. You can see what the number is. This is done by the system, so it can't be changed. So it is absolutely unique. Every object in the database is unique as well. So again, if I'm seeing something, I change it one place, I've changed it everywhere.
Well, that's all the questions that we've received so far. If you think of any questions after the webinar, please feel free to contact us. You can go to innosight.com/contact. We're available through your phone, chat, email. We'd just like to thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Make sure to join us for next time for One Lifecycle, One Tool on May 15th at 2 p.m. Eastern. As always, we will also send the recording and slide deck to everyone that attended today. For more resources, we encourage you to visit our website and our blog, as well as connect with us on social media through the Innosight user group or through Twitter using the handle @Innosight. That concludes today's presentation. Thank you again for your attendance, and we hope to see you again at our next webinar in May. Please enjoy the rest of your day.